Greetings to all listeners and viewers. This is Paul Sandhu. Today is April the 1st, 2018. It's Easter Sunday, and I figured it would be a good day rather than to participate in satanic rituals which are taking place all over churches all across the world. It would be a better idea to just do some more Bible study and continue with my Bible history series, which at this moment I am in the Bronze Age. For those of you who may not have watched my previous videos on this topic, the Bronze Age, essentially, the way creation, the history of creation goes down is that works is, biblically speaking, that there were ages of time and worlds that came before this present age, which is the age of Adam, that began with Adam in the Garden of Eden about 6,000 years ago. But that does not mean the earth or the world are only 6,000 years old. As a matter of fact, they may well be millions of years old, or perhaps even longer. Who knows? Only God knows for sure. So, the previous three ages, if we classify them according to the names of gold, precious and base metals, as has been done by people throughout history, then we can say, like in the beginning of creation was the Golden Age, which was followed by the Silver Age, and the reason it transitioned from gold to silver was that evil entered into God's creation through the race of angels. The story of the leader of these angels, called the anointed cherub, is told in Ezekiel 28. And before then, there was no evil, there was no sin, there was no death, there was no darkness in creation, and therefore it was called the Golden Age. So, and I am of the opinion that this age, the Golden Age, was very highly advanced technologically, much more so than even in the present day, and with various types of energies in use, computers, communication technologies that are far more advanced than our own. And this is where the myths of places like Atlantis come from, which is supposed to have been a technological marvel. And to understand what it might really have looked like, I think the TV series Stargate Atlantis did a very good job in depicting it. So those worlds were the type of worlds that came into existence in the Golden Age, before evil and sin and darkness entered into creation. Once evil entered in, things began to deteriorate, and that led us into what's called the Silver Age. The Silver Age, though, I believe, was still very highly advanced technologically. However, corruption had set in, and from that point onwards, everything began to deteriorate. And then we get to the Bronze Age. The Silver Age, I believe, was highlighted by the introduction of things such as money, banking, corporations, trading. All these date back to the time of the angels and of the men. Oh yes, I should talk about the men, or the flesh and blood creatures who were very much like us, that inhabited the earth. These are the creatures called the sons of God in scripture, in passages such as in Genesis chapter 6, and also in the book of Job. Yes, I understand that, somebody watching the video for the first time, this may be new information to you, that you've always been told that these sons of God were angels, but there are many, many videos on my channel now. Even after YouTube deleted my old channel with about 300 videos on it for no reason whatsoever, I have been able to re-upload a lot of those with the Bible history, especially about the sons of God, about the story of the anointed cherub and the Lucifer, and these would be a good primer for you to watch them first in order to understand what I'll be talking about in this video. Alright, anyhow, so the earth was populated by the sons of God, and they built material worlds on here. The heavens were ruled by the angels God had given. I should not use the word rules, although that did come into play later on once evil entered in. But in the beginning, I believe God gave them, the angels, the administration of the heavens, and the earth was given to flesh and blood creatures, because the earth is a corporeal place, is a terrestrial place which has been created for corporeal beings, and that was true back in that day, as it is true today, as we are told that the heavens belong unto the Lord, but the earth has He given to the children of men. So these sons of God were on the earth, and as these angels began to introduce this system of merchandising and banking and buying and selling, it eventually led to warfare. Okay, so a great number of wars, of which record we see even on the earth till this very day, occurred in those days, which were far more devastating wars than anything we have seen in modern history. In these wars, eventually, the angels, who might originally have fought between themselves, who was going to be the greatest, they eventually had wars with the sons of God men. And these sons of God men were led by the most famous of all, called Lucifer. Lucifer was not an angel. The Bible clearly tells us that he was a man. So it is this story of Lucifer that we are pursuing now, that I am detailing in these videos on the Bronze Age. I have covered the story of the angels and the anointed cherubs in part, I believe, 1, 2, 3 of this series, titled the Bible History Series. And again, if you haven't watched it, this will be something which would be useful information, and I believe also scripturally true. So, the conclusion is that creation is far older than we've been led to believe, and all these geological sites that we find all across the earth, and more of them are coming to light every day, as for example in this video that I'm going to play for you. These were not created in the modern age, which began with Adam. They were not created in the days of Noah. They were created and destroyed in the age that came before. Okay, as I said, in the gold and silver age, the technology was very, very advanced. And the buildings and construction, I believe, that they did in those days would be something like we have in the modern times, with glass, metal, and concrete, which is very, very easily destroyed. That was demonstrated on 9/11 with basically the dustification, of the two towers and more, which basically turned to dust in a matter of minutes. Okay, so these kind of structures, they don't last, and I believe it is as a result of all these wars that went on in the Silver Age into the Bronze Age. At the end of the Silver Age, at the end of which I believe the angels lost. The angels are the equivalent of the mythological titans. They lost and they were imprisoned in hell. Okay, but by then the world had been so destroyed that it was decided that the only way to build structures that would be more permanent, that would last a longer time, would be to build them of stone. So from a glass, metal, concrete age, it went into the Stone Age, and it is the evidence of the Stone Age construction that we have everywhere, as I will be documenting in one of these videos, which are done by many, many researchers doing excellent work, revealing to us all across the world, from Russia to Africa, to Asia, to India, to, wherever, even Australia, New Zealand, South America, North America, these megalithic structures of stone, they exist everywhere. And therefore, there is no possibility that these could have been built before the time of the flood of Noah. In the age between Adam and the flood of Noah, the time was too short, so these had to be done a long time before, and that is my conclusion from Scripture, that these happened in the Bronze Age, which was the age of Lucifer. So let me play this video, and then I will stop it from time to time to give you my conclusions as to what most of these researchers who do not believe in the Bible, they're seeing these things, but they don't know, they can't explain where they came from and why they exist, but I believe the Bible has those answers. Now I would like to say a couple of words about the word Nephilim, as it is used in the Bible in Genesis chapter 6 verse 4, and I believe only in one other place in the Bible, in Nephilim, in the book of Numbers, I mean. Alright, in the Bible, several Hebrew words were used to describe giants. And by that, it was nothing meant that they were anything supernatural, but that they were just flesh and blood like us, except that they were of much bigger stature. Okay, so these giants, or the Nephilim you could call them, the Anakim, they're called Zamzumim. There are different Hebrew words, like I said. But these giants were not created in the time of Adam or after that. They had existed in the age prior. They actually, I believe, the giant people have existed for a very long time. For example, in mythology, the stories of the Titans and even the Olympian gods, who were believed were of bigger stature than us, they go back a long, long ways, almost to the beginning of creation. So in the time of the Bronze Age, in the time of Lucifer, when he's the one that was the ruler of the whole earth and wanted to conquer the kingdom of heaven as well and to become God himself, the giants certainly existed. And even like other mythological creatures such as Cyclops and hybrids. And the hybrid story, which I will be covering in future episodes, I believe they were a product of genetic experimentation that went on mostly in the Bronze Age. And the whole reptilian class, of which Satan is the most prominent member, I believe, or also came about as a result of the genetic experimentation and manipulation and that was employed in those days to create whole numbers, like countless numbers of abominable hybrid creatures, and even, like I said, an entire species, the reptilian species, that did not exist prior to that time, in my opinion. So these stories that we hear about mythology, they have to have some kind of explanation, and they do have an explanation in the Bible. When we begin to understand that the way the ages, as I told you in the Bible, the way the ages of time are divided, that in everything begins in perfection, as we read in Ezekiel chapter 28, thou wast perfect in thy ways till the day iniquity was found in thee. This is in regards to the anointed cherub, who is the father of evil and the originator of evil in God's creation. So yes, there was a time of perfection, and since then there has been a time of deterioration. And as I have shown in many of my videos, that there was a reason for that, because God needed evil to exist. It served his purposes. And these prior ages, that is the real purpose of them, that in them evil was born, then it grew, it matured, and as evil grew, it did evil things. And that is the history of those worlds. They were very evil, abominable worlds. They were not, a lot of people, are in awe of them, that, these were, they had technology, so they must have been really wise and good. No, they were not. They were far more evil and wicked than even man is today. So that is the reason why that those worlds were eventually destroyed. As we read in books like Jeremiah chapter 4 and 2 Peter chapter 3, that, these heavens and the earth, the old ones, the first ones, they have been destroyed. This history is in the Bible. So I don't want you to, get too into this word Nephilim, because it simply means giant. It doesn't mean anything supernatural. It doesn't mean like a hybrid creature. No, they were not hybrid. They were genetic mutants, okay? They had been created as a result of taking like normal, human genes and doing something to them to introduce the gene of gigantism into them, and that is how they came about. Now, I will cover in my future episodes also the story of the Titans, who can be compared to the angels, okay, the race of angels. But the Titans at the same time seem to be very much flesh and blood. So, how do we reconcile that? In the Bible, we are told, the angels are locked away in hell, and in mythology, you read that the Titans, that's exactly where they're locked away, that they lost the war to the Olympians, and then they were imprisoned there. So these stories have a great deal of parallels. So that is something also that I will be covering in future videos, because the information is so much. But the conclusion, again, I want to emphasize is that if you really want to understand where these things, who built them, why they were built, what happened to them, then you have to look in the Bible. There is no other document, book, story, legend that is going to give you all the answers. So the short video I'm going to play for you is from a channel titled The Lost History Channel on YouTube, and the video itself is titled, Was There a Civilization That Predates All Other Known Ancient Civilizations? And the answer is very, as I have concluded in many of my videos and shown to you before, yes, of course there was, because what we know as languages and different cultures, this variation did not begin until the Tower of Babel about 4,500 years ago. Prior to that, all the civilizations that existed, whether it was in the Golden Age or in the Silver or the Bronze Age, the people, they had one language and essentially one culture. And it is because of that, whether it was in Mexico or it was in Russia or it was in China, whatever construction techniques were similar, the purposes were similar. So there is a great deal of uniformity and similarity in these ancient ruins because essentially they were built by the same people. All right, and that is a very simple explanation. And therefore, it is not surprising, like modern archaeologists and modern, anthropologists, etc., they will have us believe, that these ruins, for example, in Angkor Wat in Cambodia, or in the Ural Mountains, Russia, or the ones in Peru, etc., they were built by very modern civilizations, like the Incas, etc., but that is just not, none of the evidence supports any of those kind of claims. Okay, but this question that this person asking in this, is a very good one. And these are the sort of conclusions that these researchers are drawing, even though they do not believe in the Bible. But it is because they do not believe in the Bible, they don't understand real biblical history, that they're not able to connect all the dots and come to the conclusions that are very obvious. That yes, these ages of time existed, these worlds existed, they were eventually destroyed, before we came to this present age, which begins in Genesis chapter 1:3, when God said, "Let there be light." Not in Genesis 1:2, in which we read that the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. Okay, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. That was that ruined wasteland that happened at the end of the Bronze Age, when Lucifer, who was attempting to ascend into heaven, his rebellion, let's say, was put down, and the whole world that he had been created was destroyed. And this evidence of this cataclysmic destruction is everywhere on our earth. So, my friend, you who made this video, I commend you for it. Thank you for making these type of videos. We give you full credit for the work that you're doing, but what conclusions you can draw, those, you don't have many conclusions to draw because you don't understand the full history, which is found in the only real and complete book of history in the world, and that is the Bible. Most people, they have a cursory understanding of the Bible, but they have not studied it and understand the depth of it. And if they did, they would it will leave them in awe, because all the answers are in it.
There's very little room left to deny the fact that ancient cultures throughout the world were all connected in the ancient past. We see depictions of flying machines in Mexico that are very similar to the ones of the Via Mana we see in India, for example. And there is, of course, also the handbag of the gods. The handbags are literally depicted by every culture on every part of the earth. But how can this be? This obviously points to the fact that the world was once connected in ancient times, pretty much like it is today. And you never know, perhaps in a few thousand years, people will look back at this day and age and make similar comparisons regarding mobile phones or something like that. Seems plausible, does it not?
So this person's conclusion that the world was once connected, even as it is today, where we have the means of communication to be able to communicate with people, like in Australia, can communicate to people in Alaska and anywhere in the world, so that is how the world was. And it was these ruins that we see that suggest that, yes, at one point in time, there was a great deal of uniformity in the culture and the civilizations. That is because there were. And this was the world of Lucifer in the Bronze Age, which may have lasted like tens of thousands of years. That is when they had all these constructions went on. A lot of these ruins that you look at, they are military bases of old. There were, underground laboratories where all this genetic hybridization and other type of experimentation went on, because they were very scientifically advanced. All those things that did happen, all right, they went to a point where they had created so many of these different types of creatures and species that they really started thinking that they were God. And that is the reason why Lucifer tried to ascend into heaven from the earth. Okay, that's the story of Lucifer. Who haven't watched it, you can go back and watch some more Bible history videos. That Lucifer was not in heaven. He wanted to go up there. And that is why, you see all these depictions of flying craft, etc. And the stories in mythology of flying machines. It is very, very obvious when the Bible says, when Lucifer said, I will ascend into heaven, and being a man, he needed some kind of vessel or craft to ascend up in. And that is how these dots are connected, that this is what really happened, that this was the time when these creatures, not just Lucifer, but his other contemporaries, they fancied themselves to be gods, and this continued to the present time, where a lot of these idolatrous practices that were introduced back then have stayed with us, where we do not, only give homage and reverence to the God who is the one God, who is the creator of all things, but to a number of these creatures, some of whom still exist as disembodied spirit, and they are worshipped even today as gods, as happened back in that day.
How is it possible the ancient Olmecs, Aztecs, Egyptians, and cultures of those in New Zealand shared depictions of their gods which are almost identical? Is this just random cultural spread? Or is it possible there is more to it than we are willing to accept?
See, the principle of Occam's razor tells us that the simplest explanation is usually the correct one. And in this case, there is so much evidence of so many different parts of the world with structures in so many different parts of the world that are almost identical, then of course the simple explanation is that they were all built by the same race or the same civilizations that had the same knowledge and that had the same building techniques, that basically had a common origin. And when we understand, according to Job 38:7, when God began the process of creation or creating intelligent life, first and foremost, he created the angels, who are called the morning stars in that scripture, and then also at the same time the sons of God, who are the humans. Okay, the angels, of course, were in the heavenly realms, and the sons of God were on the earth. And this is where they lived, and this is where they built these worlds. And these worlds, one part that is usually left out, which is none of these, these people, the researchers, they never equated with, is with money. That, they had a system, they had economics, they had the same things we have today. Like our world is pretty much a blue or is a copy, has been copied. The blueprint for our world is these ancient worlds that existed, because those creatures that existed, especially Satan, who is called the god of this world, he existed in those worlds. So the systems that he has built in the present world, they are basically a reflection or a copy of those systems. And a lot of these wars that happened, there has to be a reason for wars, right? And the wars usually are a result of some sort of, money or money or wealth is involved, where one nation might want the land or the resources or basically the people, whatever the wealth of a nation is, another nation wants it, and then they go to war. So that's what happened in those days as well. The angels, they introduced these systems of money and commerce and banking and trading, etc., which is how they controlled those worlds. And eventually, the people they were controlling, including like the Lucifer and the Luciferians, who are the Greek gods, the Olympians, they are patterned after those. That's where this is their real story, that they were these people who were living on the earth and they were suppressed by the angelic race, which is the Titans, and therefore they went to war with each other at some point in time. That's why these wars happened, and that's where these ruins came from. Now, in this year, one interesting observation, I'm going to show you a graphic which has been taken from this video, an image that has been taken from this video. And what this image is going to show us is what I told you, that in this day and age, that, they had a great deal of hybridization that went on, which was a genetic combining of different species. So, for example, this guy talks about these handbags that all these gods, so-called gods, were carrying, or these ancient races were carrying around with them. And I can't really say, what the purpose of these handbags is or what their significance is. I really haven't thought about it. But what is significant is in this image you will see is he has shown you 3 examples of three, different creatures carrying these bags. But notice the one, what does he have? He has the head of a bird. And this is so common. You have like Anubis, for example, in the Doberman-headed god. And it is just goes on and on and on that these hybrid creatures, they existed. They very much mingled with these people who looked very human like us. And they also had giants at the same time. So when I tell you that this is the world, that as the title suggests, a strange world of Lucifer, monsters, hybrids, Nephilim, dragons, reptiles, then that is true. I will get to the dragons and the reptiles in a bit, especially the story of Satan. But this is why this uniformity of the evidence is explained. There is no other explanation for it. And just as an aside, in the middle picture, in the middle guy in this picture, see the fish hat he's wearing? That's where the fish hat of the Pope comes from. Okay? So you think that this fish symbol that they show for Jesus has anything to do with Jesus? No. Actually, it is a Phoenician symbol because their god Dagon was a fish-headed god, and that's who they worship in the Vatican. It is Dagon. It is not Jesus Christ.
The Leventus Stele 19 offers a curious representation of the feathered serpent, a humanoid figure sitting in some kind of vehicle or chair as if manipulating some sort of device. At first, this may not sound extraordinary or weird. However, it becomes strange when you find nearly identical representations of gods halfway around the world. According to the Maori legend, the god Parengahoa flew on his magical bird from his legendary dwelling Hawaii to New Zealand. Curiously, according to legend, this ancient god came from heaven riding a silver bird. These two cases are reminiscent of the Mayan lord Pakal's sarcophagus. In this depiction, Pakal appears to be operating a machine with a flame coming out of the bottom of it. It is so named Lord Pakal's spaceship because of these features. How is it possible that the ancient Egyptians and ancient pre-Incan cultures developed on opposite sides of the globe yet mysteriously share so many similarities?
So I believe I've offered a pretty logical explanation for why there are so many similarities between these different civilizations on opposite sides of the world. Okay, and a lot of people, they conjecture, it was aliens that came, it was the Anunnaki, it was this and that. But when you begin to see, you will, really analyze the information, you will fast come to the conclusion that all of that, they might have like one piece that you can perhaps believe, but the whole picture doesn't fit together, all right? So these are all stories that are, again, that do not give us the right understanding of what actually happened. Okay, when we do go into the biblical history of the ages and the reasons why, the primary reason being that the history of the past ages is primarily the history of the origin and the growth of evil. Okay, it had to be allowed time by God for it to reach its complete maturity, and that happened over several ages because the complexity of evil is very far more complex and far more multifaceted than most people can realize, which of course, that being it is the opposite of good, which is God, that shows you the complexity and the multifaceted nature of God. We really can't even begin to fathom it, So all these ages that went by, that's what happened. First, the angels rebelled, which was also, all these things were planned and purposed by God that it was going to happen. And then, of course, these humans, the sons of God, some of them joined in with that rebellion, and eventually they went to war with each other. And that's where you get the myths of the Titans, the Olympians, and the wars of the gods, etc. It's not like just some random evolutionary aliens that showed up here. No, everything was created, and everything that has happened is explained. And in the end, what we learn from it is what it is that God has been doing all these ages, and what it is that He has purpose to happen in the future, and ultimately what is the purpose of our existence. None of those answers will come to you from anywhere else.
Not only are we referring to architecture and symbolism, we can easily include religion and science into the list of shocking similarities that are not only being ignored by mainstream scholars, they are even being repressed as if a giant cover-up in ancient history is occurring before our very eyes.
Well, there is absolutely no doubt that a cover-up is going on, and the cover-up is not of human origin. It originates with the god of this world, who is Satan. And as we can read in 2 Corinthians 4:4, the god of this world has blinded the minds of them which believe not, lest the light of the glorious gospel of Christ, who is the image of God, should shine unto them. And that is what will happen if people had, real knowledge about the ancient history, the knowledge about their origins, the knowledge about our cosmos and how it is shaped. All these things are kept hidden. Pretty much all the information that people are fed in this world is a lie. Almost all of it, okay? But it is also, again, serving the purposes of God. Because when those lies are exposed and we begin to see the truth, that is when the light of Jesus Christ shines so bright that it really transforms and changes us, okay, into a completely new species of creature, which is the purpose of all creation. Or I would say, which is the main purpose of creation. Okay, that will be a little bit, that's more into doctrine, not into history. But I do have many videos on my channel, which if you want to understand your purpose and what is happening and why things happen, such as why does evil exist, then there's plenty of information on there that'll be useful to you for those who really want to understand real truth, who want to understand their real purpose and origins and their own origins and the purpose of their existence. Then that's the place to go. Okay, so in this world, it is not just ancient history that is hidden. It is pretty much everything that you come across from the day you're born. As long as the purpose of your life, for example, that you're supposed to get born and just get a job and make lots of money and buy lots of things. All those things, everything almost is a lie, because we live in a mind-controlled matrix, just as the Bible tells you that the minds of people are blinded, and they are blinded by false information. That is why this history, which is right in front of our face and should be so obvious for everybody, that all this crap that we've been given about evolution and monkeys and all that kind of stuff, that it is just a lie, because all this exposes it in a nanosecond. But it has to be kept hidden. And the people that are the human component of this, like I said, this is a spiritual battle, and it is like spiritual, unseen, dark spirit forces that are at work, but they have human puppets. And these human puppets are given lots of prestige, lots of money, and lots of goodies in this world, and that is why they sell out. And don't tell me that people in academia, in archaeology, and in who study geology and even geography and history, that they don't know that all the stuff that they're teaching kids in college and in universities and even in high schools, etc., it's all crap and BS. At least the people at the very top, they certainly know. Okay, yet they continue the lie because they're benefiting from it. In this world, they have some kind of benefit, and that's all it takes. They sell their souls for what, 30 pieces of silver? Probably not even that.
How can we explain these striking similarities? Well, either ancient civilizations were interconnected and came into contact with each other in the past, or a long-lost culture predates all the ancient civilizations on Earth. And it's from this ancient culture that ancient civilizations such as the Aztecs and Egyptians inherited their knowledge. Imagine for a second that this was true, and by the way, it does seem plausible. An ancient forgotten civilization inhabited our planet. Were these beings the Atlanteans that taught all other civilizations similar traits? We can explain the striking similarities of worldwide culture with this theory. We have to start taking into account the possibility that such a mother culture existed in the past and predated all ancestral civilizations. This, however, would mean that history as we know it today is only partial, incomplete, and points to the fact that human beings are in fact a species with amnesia.
Now, I wouldn't say that human beings are a species with amnesia, but however, I would say that human beings are a species that is very easily fooled. It doesn't take much at all. All right, and that is the reason why everybody is just, kept so busy in their mundane lives that they don't have time to stop and think and look at the world around them and try and understand what it is that they are a part of. Now, I do recommend, I really enjoy these observations that are being made by this commentator in this video, that, there's an ancient civilization that predates all civilizations. It comes before the Egyptians, the Sumerians, the Babylonians, any of them, before even like the Tower of Babel, etc., that it predates. In this here video, I think this guy is going to try and connect this with the flood of Noah, but I would disagree with that. That these civilizations that whose evidence are these megalithic ruins, etc., they are not from anywhere close to Noah's day. They actually predate that by a much greater period of time. Okay, in Genesis chapter 1, verse 2, when we read that the earth was without form and void, that means that it was a ruined wasteland. Okay, that is not how God created it. A ruin is something that first has to be built. Okay, so these worlds were once built and then they were destroyed, and that is the state in which we find it in Genesis 1-2, before Adam and Eve were created and placed in the Garden of Eden, before there was even a Garden of Eden. So this is, but it is a confirmation of the history that is in the Bible, all these findings of these researchers. And like in last video, part 1 of this, Strange World of Lucifer series that will stretch into many parts, I've shown you, like these researchers into ancient history, they are drawing these conclusions from these ruins that, there was some very big warfare that went on that destroyed these worlds. And again, that is a confirmation information in the Bible that, when we read that Lucifer made the whole world into a wilderness. You can read that in Isaiah chapter 14. Okay, so I find it exciting that all this information, this knowledge that is coming, as the Bible tells us in the book of Daniel, that, the closer we get to the end, more knowledge shall increase. I believe God is going to reveal, because he has left this evidence on this earth for us to see, to study, and to learn from, that he is going to reveal everything that, that is in regards to our ancient past, and much more information, so that when his judgment does befall this whole world, as it must, nobody will have an excuse that they didn't know. Okay, because the information has come out, it is out in the open, and therefore, if anybody is blind, then they themselves are to blame for it, not God. And also, again, like I recommend, I commend these people who are doing this research, who are trying to figure out what is it that they're looking at, what might have happened. Then, my friends, I do hope that you come across my videos, because you will see the answers. They are there, all of them. We do not live in a world without answers. The Son of God, the Bible tells us, came to give us an understanding. And, frankly, like my mind is blown every day, because the understanding that comes is so much greater than I had ever thought, in my younger days, even like 10, 20 years ago, that I would understand all these things in such a logical and reasonable manner. But I am, and I hope you are as well.
While today's scholars reject the notion that a mother culture existed on Earth in the distant past, and reject with even greater notion the idea of Atlantis, there are many indicators that cannot be overlooked while studying ancient civilizations around the globe. Agriculture is known to have started near the Mount Ararat. This is also where the Ark of Noah was said to have come to rest. This is where the survivors of the Great Flood started a post-cataclysmic civilization that would spread out in every direction from this point and place. Could these bags represent seeds that were preserved on board the Ark in some sort of vault? Maybe they were distributed across the world as we repopulated the globe after the Great Flood.
As I said earlier, I do not agree that these ruins are anywhere from the time of Noah, or between that period of time. that came between the formation of Adam and Noah, which is about a period about 1500 years. No possible way that this whole world was they had built and dug into not just the surface, but inside the earth, inside the waters. That took a much longer period of time. And this person is trying to make this connection, but at the same time, a lot of these people that are doing this research, they miss some very obvious clues as well as to what they're looking at. For example, he's talking about the bag, which I said, I have no idea what these bags might have been. They might have been some kind of energy packs. These creatures, they were not just flesh and blood. Like they had some kind of, they were almost not just hybrids. There were also some that were, what do you call those things, cyborgs, in that they had some kind of human machine combination elements, so that sort of thing was also going on. All of those things, these transformer type creatures, they have all existed in the past, and so this could have something to do with it. But when he was talking about this seeds in the bag, he completely missed the picture that the person that's holding this bag is not like a human being. It's like a hybrid with the head of a bird or something, and not the head of a person. This is not an image of the Birdman. I saw those feathers in the back, that's why I made that connection. But this looks like more like a reptilian head. Okay, this may well be, this is something like that god of the Mayan people or the Mesoamericans, the Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent. And, this is actually what Satan might have looked like. A dragon, we imagine dragons to be what we see in Hollywood movies, etc. And some of them may well have looked like that, but that doesn't mean that they all did. These serpent dragons, they could have been some sort of like human type looking creatures as well, with these reptilian heads and scales, etc. So they were not necessarily just dragons. As this creature, he has those wings, he's got the head of the reptile. So this may well be what Satan looks like in reality. Okay, so this information, not just about ancient history and ancient ruins. When you start seeing these images that have been carved on so many of these buildings all across the world, and so many of them are representative of hybrids, and you can even go and see that today in the temples of India, especially in southern India, that it will really boggle your mind. This is not something that somebody just conjures up out of their head. Okay, these things were real. They existed, and that's when the artist, today, like he's making the portrait of the queen or something, she's modeling for him, and that's exactly what in that day, these creatures were doing. They were modeling, or they were like, these were some images carved from photographs, etc. We don't know, but these creatures were certainly real. Of that, there can be no doubt. Okay, so those are things that are also a part of this history. And we understand that, that the greatest mad scientist that ever lived was probably Lucifer. And that is what they did. They created these creatures, and I'm sure they were created like in the movie Star Wars, which, you see the movie, the one that was titled Clone, Attack of the Clones or something. They had created an army of clones. Okay, and that was for military purposes. And this, I believe, is also one of the reasons why so many of these hybrids were created. They had some sort of military applications, and which, by the way, is happening again today, because the Bible tells us there's nothing new under the sun. Okay, so I'm going to finish this off now with this probably in the next segment, where this person, is trying to sell that this might have happened in the time of Noah, but no. This happened a long time before us. He's going to try to tell us about the flood. And yes, the flood of Noah was the second biggest flood. The biggest flood was the flood of Lucifer that destroyed the world after the Bronze Age. And that flood not only destroyed the earth, it also destroyed the heavens, okay, which, as 2 Peter clearly tells us, happened. So this information is hidden in the pages of the Bible, because we've been so dumbed down by false information everywhere, including false church information, false history, false teachings about the Bible, mostly from the church, that people really have no idea what is really in it.
So many different cultures built up massive complex pyramid structures in the remote and distant past that were eerily similar to each other, as if to follow a direction from some sort of blueprint. Could the handbag also have contained information that allowed civilizations to excel and develop, and the depictions are one culture to the next, handing it forward to the next line of people? Just a thought. Why is it that ancient civilizations in America, Egypt, and ancient Mesopotamia depicting their deities carrying a mysterious handbag in their hand? Is it possible that all ancient cultures in America, Egypt, Australia, and Mesopotamia were visited by the same gods?
So the likely explanation is not that these civilizations were visited by the gods, but rather that these are the civilizations of the gods. In the Bibles, these gods are called, when in the beginning they were the sons of God, but in the process of time, as this evil, abominable activities increased, then they took many shapes and forms, like some of the hybrids that I've shown you here, and I'll show you some more. So that is what happened. And all this activity took place in the age of Lucifer. So let's separate the age of Lucifer from the age of Adam or the age of Noah. These things did not happen despite a million Bible teachers telling you that this happened in the days of Noah. It did not. It happened prior to that, in the age that came before the age of Adam.
Another instance of the ancient handbag can be found in faraway New Zealand. A Maori myth tells of a hero who once ascended to the home of the gods and returned to earth carrying 3 baskets full of wisdom.
So in 2 Peter chapter 3, in verse 5, we can read, the heavens were of old. And in verse 7, we can read, the heavens and the earth which are now. Now, how does it relate to the story this person was just telling you about? One of these elders or whatever, these tribes went up to heavens and came back with these bags of wisdom. The way it's related is this, okay? First of all, this passage from Peter, which I've quoted to you many times, and I've taught in detail in this year, but so today I won't get into detail except to mention that he does make a distinction between the heavens of old and the heavens which are the present heavens. So obviously the heavens of old do not exist any longer. Something has replaced them, which are the new heavens. So something did happen to them, right? And therefore, what we understand is this, that when these sons of God, which are the humans that first inhabited the earth, they did not originate on the earth as opposed to Adam, who was made of the earth. They originated in heaven. They were with heaven and God when God was laying the foundations of the earth, okay? So they had, and the angels were present there as well. So they had an interaction with God, with the angels, okay? And they understood everything about the heavens and the earth. They saw the earth being formed. And therefore, their technologies, they included, somehow they were transported from the heaven to the earth. So they included these technologies of flight. They were able to go back and forth. They had communication. They had communication with the angels, and they even had communication with God himself, which even happens to this very day, as we read in the book of Job, that the sons of God of these races that still exist to this present time, where exactly, don't ask me, probably somewhere right here on this earth or up in the heavens, they still come to see God and the mount of the congregation. They come to present themselves before the Lord. All right. It is because they have the means and the technologies to do so. So this technology, the understanding that flight is not something that's new, that was invented in the 20th century. It went on in a long, long time before this world of Adam. I do not believe it happened in the days of Noah, but it happened in the ages before. That's where these stories come from. And the Mayan mythology, it is filled with it. And Ezekiel, we can read about these, the wheels and the flight. Flight is in the Bible as well. So are all these fictions? No, of course they're not. Of course they're not. And therefore, when we read these stories, so what happens is Satan, of course, twists this history around, and he tells you it's these aliens that were visiting us. No, they were not aliens. Okay, in the world of Lucifer, flight, and communication between what's up in the heavens and the earth, it definitely went on, and there's nothing, strange about it, because that was happening right from the very beginning when God made these creatures, the angels and the sons of God.
Göbekli Tepe is one of the oldest ancient megalithic temples on our planet. There, interactive massive stone pillars arranged in a set of rings stand tall and proud, telling the story when different civilizations ruled all over the planet. The massive stones were believed to have been carved some 14,000 years ago, even though recent evidence points towards the fact that it is probably far older. Again, we see the strange bag present here. Nobody really has any idea what these bags are. The oldest known depictions of the bags is found in northern Australia and is thought to be 15,000 years old. The creation myth story of this ancient art describes the Earth Mother who carried all her babies in her bags. As she traveled far and wide, she scattered her babies, which gave rise to many different cultures and tribes. Even in North America, there are petroglyphs that are roughly the same age as the Australian depictions. Again, we see the ancient handbag apparently being portrayed as carrying the seeds of life. Could the civilizations around the world all be scattered remains of the lost empire before the Great Flood? Each culture appears to be telling the same stories, and all this is fitting in with a time in history of when the flood took place.
So I would say yes, these stories do date back to the time before the Great Flood, but not the flood of Noah, rather the flood of Lucifer that destroyed not only this earth but also the heavens. And I would like to make one more comment about this dating that this person is speaking about, 14,000, 15,000 years. You know, all these methods that are used, like carbon dating, for example, none of them are reliable. Unless we have some historical information that is going to allow us to accurately, date, such as, for example, if you want to, the Roman Colosseum, etc., we have some historical information that can, give us a pretty good idea that these were built somewhere in, 2,000 years ago or so. But absence that information, it's anybody's guess. So don't, somebody will be carbon dated this to be 200,000 years ago. No, they have carbon dated things that are like 20 years old, and it has shown that these are like 200,000 years old. So carbon dating is not a reliable form of dating, and there really is no way of dating stone, etc. So these things could be like 20,000 years old, or they could be 20 million years old for all we know.
What do you guys think of the idea that ancient cultures around the world were the survivors of the flood, and knowledge was passed down from one civilization who survived on board the ark with all the equipment to make life flourish again on Earth after the great cataclysmic flood? We told you the truth would seem strange. What are you thinking? Comments below, and thank you for watching.
So in conclusion, I would say that, these civilizations, they are not from the days of Noah or the time after, but before, a long time before then. And as we can understand that there was only one civilization for all intents and purposes, and therefore they had everything was common. It's like, today there's a great deal of homogenization of culture, that, you have the same music, the same dress, the same everything pretty much all over the world to a great degree, okay? Even though there are so many different cultures and languages, yet there is a great deal, as you showed in the beginning of this video, of things that we have in common. Now, just imagine that there were no different languages, there were no different cultures, it was all one. How would the world be? It would be the same all over, and that is exactly what happened. But again, not in the days of Noah. It was in the days of Lucifer. So these are the remnants, these are the ruins, this is the evidence that those ages, which the Bible tells us existed, they did come and they did go to bring us to the time of Genesis chapter 1 verse 2, after which God began the process of recreation. So the 6 days of creation in Genesis chapter 1, they are the 6 days of recreation. They are not the original creation. And a major part of those ancient ages was the age of Lucifer, which is the Bronze Age, which is the closest to us. And this information that comes down to us, first of all, it was known in the days of Noah to a great extent. This history was known by those people. But secondly, it is that this has been offered by Satan as an alternative history in mythological form. Where he has taken God the Creator out of the picture, and he has introduced a multiplicity of gods, such as the Greek gods or the Hindu gods or the Scandinavian gods, or any number of gods have taken the place of the one God. But there is a great deal of truth at the same time in those stories. But we don't just confirm history by mythology, we also confirm it by this evidence which is carved in stone, and it is scattered all across the face of our earth. This is the evidence that God has allowed to remain in place so that, we don't remain ignorant. We understand that, these things happen. But more importantly, when we see it from the eyes of the Bible, through the understanding of biblical history, then we will also understand why it happened. Anyhow, thank you for listening. This is Paul Sendhu.
Let down the curtain, I'm withdrawing from the play. The whole show was lousy, mostly just the man that I portrayed. Without your deceiving, I never would have stayed around so long. I found a new friend, and I'm trading you in on him. He cares where I'm going, not where I've been. He washed away my sins. You showed me the bright lights, the long nights, and the cold, cold mornings. Led me like a child to destruction without fair warning. You filled my eyes with deceitfulness, and I could not see the truth. I found a new friend, and I'm trading you in on him. He cares where I'm going, not where I've been. He washed away my sins. He gives me peace of mind, that's one thing you never seem to do. He clothes me in righteousness and teaches me how to deal with you. Though you have many faithful friends, he will destroy you in the end. I found a new friend, and I'm trading you in on him. He cares where I'm going, not where I've been. He washed away my sins. He washed away my sins.